Hello and welcome to MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. We will have a new guest join us today, MMA Crypt's Greg, aka Sugar Pooper. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
On to our second guest today, Mr. Brian Hunt. Brian is the founder of MMAcrypt.com and a regular on MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hello, guys. How's everybody doing?
Doing good, Brian. Okay, guys, with the introductions out the way, I'd like to start with our first topic and round one, Hunt versus Silva. It was described as an all-time classic heavyweight fight by the fans and media. What did you make of the heavyweight classic between Hunt and Silva, Brian?
I love the fight. I didn't quite agree with the outcome. It kind of shows the flaws in the scoring, in my opinion. The rounds that Hunt won were pretty vicious rounds versus the rounds that Silva may have won were really close rounds, especially the first round. If somebody gave Silva that first round, it wasn't out of much. He just barely got it. But the two rounds that Hunt, I felt, won decisively, he made a lot of damage. And I have a hard time feeling that one of those two rounds is equal in scoring to the first round. But that's sadly where we're at with MMA and the inefficiency of the scoring system. So a great fight. I won't take that away. I had Hunt winning, but I'm also a huge Mark Hunt nut hugger, so I have biased eyes.
Greg, what did you make of the fight?
I thought it was honestly one of the best, if not the best, heavyweight fight I've ever seen, besides Kane versus JDS too. And I have to agree with Brian here that I thought Hunt had the fight won, and I definitely do agree that I think I gave Bigfoot 2 rounds at the most, and Hunt won in devastating fashion his round. So, well, as far as the draw, though, I think both men were winners in that fight. I think they're both going to get really good fights after this.
I was really impressed with how they both played into each other's strengths. You know, Bigfoot, he's really growing on me now as a complete mixed martial artist. You know, I feel like Hunt made him play the stand-up game, and he played it very well. But what shocked me even more was how Hunt managed to stop the takedown.
If Hunt doesn't get tired, he's got decent ground game. It's always been Hunt's cardio issues in the past. He did well against Fedor way back when. I mean, 8 minutes into that fight, he was winning in my opinion. Then he got tired, and then Fedor won. So I think his ground game has been overly joked at, but I think that was more due to his cardio. And now that he has cardio, I mean, Mark Hunt just went 25 minutes. That's pretty fucking impressive. I mean, yeah, he was tired, but only Cain Velasquez is heavyweight going to go 25 and not be tired. So that says a lot. Very good, very, very good takedown defense. And he wasn't bad on the ground when he went there. And the one time he was on his back, I think was more of an accident. He went for a takedown and kind of fell, and Silva fell on top of him. But I've only watched the fight once. Maybe there was a legitimate takedown that I missed, but loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Did the fight surpass your expectations, Brian?
Yes. I was shocked at Silva's chin because Hunt hit him with some nasty hooks. And the only way I saw Silva winning was scoring the takedowns and laying on top of him. I didn't think Silva could drop Mark Hunt, but he's a big guy throwing punches. But I mean, if Melvin Manhoff can knock him out, being so small, so much smaller, then it's silly not to think Silva could knock him out, or could knock him out. But it did surpass. It was a great fight, and I don't think anybody saw 5 rounds out of this fight, unless you really felt Silva was going to lay on him for 5, and that didn't happen. So I was shocked. Great fight.
Did the fight surpass your expectations, Greg?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could visibly see that Mark Hunt was in the best shape of his life. I mean, he looked really fit. And he probably trained for 5 rounds. It's probably the first time he had to do that. And, yeah, I mean, Bigfoot's chin, he got knocked out by Cormier and then by Cain Velasquez. But his chin held up in this fight, no doubt.
What did you make of rounds 4 and 5 there, Greg? That's when things got a little bit tasty. We spoke prior to this. I believe you was very impressed with those 2 rounds.
I think it was all Hunt then, and I know 2 judges gave the last round 10-8 to Hunt, But I didn't agree with that because I thought it was a solid 10-9 for him. But because he started gassing after like the half-minute point of the fifth and last round. I saw Bigfoot recovering a bit from there, but definitely all Hunt.
Brian, anything you want to say before we leave this round on the Hunt and Silva fight?
No, I was happy with the fight, and it just shows that the scoring still isn't right. It's still they might have even scored the rounds correctly in a lot of the things, but they're limited by the scoring. It's sad when a round 3 by Hunt is equal to round 1 for Silva, and I'd really push towards a half-point system, because if it was a half-point system, you give Silva a 10, 9.5, and maybe you give Hunt 10, 9.5 in the second, but then the third round's clearly 10, 9 Hunt. And then maybe round 5 was 10, 8.5. Maybe it's not a 2-point round, but it's a 1.5 because it was more than, he didn't just win the round, he really won the round, but we're pretty tight on giving that 10-8 round for a lot of us, but I'd go 10, 8.5 easily. I could make a great case for 10, 8.5. But round 1 would only be 10, 9.9 for Silva because it was a pretty limited round. But 10, 9.5, and I'd have to redo the math, but I think that would allow us to see Mark Hunt was the winner of this fight.
It's not the first time I've heard about half-point rounds. Do you like the idea of half-point rounds there, Greg?
I personally think it would make it more confusing for these judges. I mean, half of these guys are boxing judges, and you're asking them to score a half point for a submission attempt. They might not even see it.
Hey Brian, did you notice the cheeky leg kicks that Bigfoot Silva was throwing at Mark Hunt there? They seem to be working as well. So, were you impressed by them?
Yes, they did work. It's is it Ben Henderson that started kind of doing that kind of kick? Yeah. So it's a good kick, a downward angle kick where it kind of grounds the foot against the mat. It's harder to check that way. So no, it's a very effective kick. It's better than a foot stomp for sure, and it's a legal kick. You're not attacking the knee; it's more attacking the ankle. So I like it. It was good, and when you see Hunt show pain, you know that's a lot of pain. That guy doesn't show a whole lot, so very, very good kicks.
Did you think it was a little cheeky by Bigfoot Silva there, Greg? Throwing the leg kicks at a kickboxer, K1 champion. You know, I think it took Hunt by surprise, personally.
Oh, yeah, and I definitely noticed, like, he couldn't even walk straight after that. Well, he recovered on the 4th and 5th round. Looked like it wasn't bothering him too much.
Right, to wrap up the round, the media and the fans alike, they called that an heavyweight classic. Did you guys rate that as a heavyweight classic? Let's go with you first, Brian.
Yes. Is it the greatest ever? Don't know. You got Crow Cop and Feeder back in the day. That was a really good fight. But, yeah, it was great. I mean, seeing these guys go for 25 minutes and still bringing it in the 5th round, I'm not sure of another UFC fight that at heavyweight that really holds that. The Kane JDS fight went 25, or no, actually only went 4 rounds, but that was kind of a one-sided beating. So, no, it's the greatest fight I can think of UFC history and in modern MMA history.
Definitely. I think it's the greatest heavyweight fight I've ever personally got to see live, and I'm not sure about fight of the year. There's been so many good fights this year. It's kind of hard to talk about one specifically, but definitely up there.
Okay, guys, moving on to round 2, the rise and fall of Shogun and Pat Barry. What did you make of that spectacular KO for Shogun, Greg?
Whew, I loved it. I like how Florian was saying he's back, but I mean, Shogun always wins and loses, you know? I think he's always just been the same.
Yeah, he never seems to go. I don't get all this. Yeah, he was on a roll in Pride. You know, he did really spectacular in the Grand Prix, obviously. What really surprised me about this fight was the bookmakers. He had Shogun as the underdog. Now, since he's been in the UFC, we all know Shogun. He's been up and down in his form. But you've got to look at who he's been facing also, you know. His latest losses have come against Sonnen, Gustafsson, Dan Henderson, which was, a real close fight. and John Jones, you know. Does it surprise you that he was an underdog going into the fight there, Greg?
Oh, most definitely. I was rooting for Shogun the whole time. I picked Shogun on MMACrypt.com to win it by decision because I just thought to myself, Tahuna's good, but do I really think he could beat? I knew he was going to try to stand with Shogun. You know, Tahuna's going to go in there and try to stand with him. I told myself, I don't think he could get it done. I picked Shogun for sure.
Brian, what did you make of Shogun's spectacular knockout of James Tahuna?
A great punch. I mean, what was it, a left hook to a guy walking in?
Yeah, Tahuna went for the right uppercut and he threw over the left hook.
Does that mean he's back? No, Shogun could always knock out anybody. He has good hands. He's got good kicks. But until we see him look good in the third round, I'm not going to buy his back. I really ain't. This isn't going to the last 4 fights. This is going back to Mark Coleman. This is going back to Forrest Griffin. This is typical Shogun. Up, down, up, down, up, down. I don't think it's going to be anything's going to change. He's going to look great some nights, and he's not going to look great other nights. So I think that's part of the division. It's part of past injuries, maybe. So I'm not buying he's back, but I also wasn't buying he's gone either, because those people he lost to were all legitimate guys. This is just Shogun. It's part of his resume now, of a guy you're never quite sure what you're going to get.
Yeah, that's what I believe too. Does it sort of annoy you, Brian, all this he's back talk? They don't just do it about Shogun, they say it about other fighters too. You know, it's the UFC. It's stacked full of monsters, every single division. So when guys come over, they're up and down, they get a few losses, a few wins, it's bound to be expected. And then you get media saying, oh, he's back after one knockout, you know. Does that sort of annoy you sometimes, Brian?
Yeah, fans annoy me, and I annoy myself. But I do. I mean, we're fans. We're fanatics. I mean, it's short for fanatic. We're not very smart sometimes. We get overly excited. Something I've always said is no fighter is as good as their win, and no fighter is as bad as their loss. It's somewhere in the middle. We say guys are done. They're just done after a bad loss. Tahuna, he's done. That's not a bad loss because it was Shogun, but Shogun is not as great as he looked in that fight. He's not. He's not a guy that's going to come out and one-punch people in his next 3 fights. It's just not how he does stuff. But he wasn't as bad as people were saying, and as Vegas and the underdog saying coming into this fight. He's somewhere in the middle somewhere. And, we get excited, but that's what sells. Writing an average title to an average story about an average fight's not going to sell shit. But if you amplify it somehow, if he's back, I mean, Terminator, I'm back. It's fucking sold for 2 decades now. I mean, it's 2 decades of still living that shit, and that's where it's at. I mean, it really is. It sells. It's not right. I'm not sure if it's necessarily wrong, but it's just you got to kind of read through it, make your own decisions on it.
I'll tell you another good example. They did it for years with him. Vitor Belfort. Every time he got one fucking win, he's back, Vitor's back. It's like, okay. They must have said it at least 4 or 5 times. Well, he's certainly back now because he's on a fucking roll, with his TRT. So, Greg, does it sort of annoy you, all this he's back talk?
I mean, we know what we're getting from Shogun. He's one of these guys that's never gonna beat John Jones. He's never gonna beat Gustafsson. But he's gonna, if you look at his record, 6-6 in the UFC, all 6 wins come by KO or TKO. That's a company guy for the Zuffa brass. You know what I mean?
Do you think he might be potentially outweighed in this division here, Greg? We did a show not so long ago. We was talking about him moving down to middleweight. Obviously, there's been rumblings and rumours of him moving down. Do you think it'll be a wise move for him to go down to middleweight? With Sim Machida, what he just done?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you see Machida, how fit and cut he looks at 185. You got to think to yourself, Shogun's going to look really fucking muscular at 185. And, I mean, you see Nam Phan this past weekend jumping from 45 to 35. He looked in great shape. So, I mean, cutting down is just going to be a good thing for Shogun, in my opinion.
For sure. Okay, moving on to the fall of Pat Barry. Pat Barry has only won one of his last 4 fights at heavyweight, and his last 3 losses come via KO and TKO. My main issue with Barry is I think he's sort of fighting out of his weight class. Do you think it's time the UFC step in and offer him basically two choices? Now you drop down to 205 or you leave the UFC. Do you agree with that, Brian?
100%. I've been screaming that forever now. Pat Barry is such a marketable personality. He really is. Has one of the better personalities in all of MMA. I mean, he's top 3. I mean, he's not sewn in, but nobody else is. But he could be a very close second to Chael. He's wasting, and this is why I'm so frustrated. I want to be a fan of Pat Barry as a fighter, and I'm not. I am disgusted by Pat Barry. I am disgusted every time he weighs in for a fight, and it's not at 206. That it really bothers me because he's wasting his career. By the time he gets his shit together and decides, okay, I'm going to do 205, it's too late. I mean, he should have done this 2 years ago. That's how long I've been screaming it. It was the same. I feel the same with the ex-WWE wrestler guy, Bobby Lashley. If he would quit fucking juicing and come in at 205, maybe he does make an impact. But at a heavyweight, he can't fuel all the muscles. And Pat Barry's always been a soft heavyweight. He's not a guy you're going to see the 8-pack on. He's got giant legs. He says he can't. He'd have to cut off a leg to make weight. Bullshit. You got to eat right. You got to do it right and train your ass off. And he's training his ass off. I just don't think he's training right. And he needs to get with maybe Dolce and find a right diet. But it might be too late. I mean, it wasn't the biggest shots that knocked him out this weekend. There were big shots, but he went fucking sleeping pretty quick in that fight. And between the head being pinned against the mat and the shots of a big guy coming down on you, maybe his chin's good or bad. I don't know, but it's a waste. It's a waste of a career, and it really bothers me because it might be too late now. And so yes, the UFC should say 205 a bye.
Brian, do you worry for his health? Basically, he's had 3 KOs/TKOs in 1 year. You know, you mentioned it's not been heavy shots. What's been putting him out? You know, you starting to get a bit worried for him.
Absolutely. He's not. What is he? 5'11" on a good day. I mean, I don't know how tall he is. I'm guessing he's 5'11" on a good day.
On a good day.
Maybe closer to 5'10", and he's fighting big men. I mean, he's fighting big men, and he's used to getting hit. He's got a career of getting hit and taking shots, but he's in the wrong division. I mean, this is not amateur league, and I get so frustrated. I think of the fights he could have at 205. Those fights excite me so much. I mean, I like the thought of him and Shogun going at it. I really do. And it's not going to the ground. It's going to be stand-up. I think Pat can stand with a lot of people. But he can't be pushed against the cage. He can't hold people off. So it's it really pisses me off. It's a nice guy. It's a really nice guy. And he's wasting his career. And it might be already too late.
Greg, do you think the UFC should say, drop to 205 or we basically have to cut you?
I mean, you guys honestly stole the words right out of my mouth because when I was watching the Soa Palele and Pat Barry fight over, I noticed that Soa was just way too big for this guy. Once he got the mount, I mean, exactly in my head I thought, dude, this guy's way too small for heavyweight. I mean, you see how Soa mounted him, and that's exactly what I was thinking. This guy's too small for heavyweight. And yeah, he's talked about, it's impossible for me to make light heavyweight. I'd like to see him try, man, because what's left for him at heavyweight? Nothing, right? I mean, this guy's taking beatings, like you guys said, 4 knockout losses in the past, 2 years. That's bad. That's just bad. And, there's a lot of fun matchups for him at 205. I agree with that, definitely.
Okay, moving on to round 3, Hector Lombard versus Jake Shields. It was recently announced that Hector Lombard will be facing Jake Shields at UFC 171 in Dallas, Texas on March 15th. What's your thoughts on this welterweight showdown, Brian?
I have a hard time getting excited with any Jake Shields fight. But I get excited at the potential of Hector knocking him out. And it's not fair because Jake Shields seems like a really nice guy. But his stand-up is just so amateurish, and it hasn't grown that much, and that I look at the guys he works out with, and how does his stand-up not get better? I have a hard time imagining him training with the Diaz brothers and not improving his stand-up game. And maybe I'm not fair. I've got such a bad taste on the guy, I can't see it. But I can't see a good jab out of the guy, and that's what he needs is a good jab. He throws something out there, but I'm not quite sure what it is. And I mean, he finger poked halfway decent against GSP, so maybe that's a start. But I'm not a fan of the guy. I'm just not. And his one dimension is so great. If he could just get a decent jab together and a little bit of hands, he'd be halfway decent. And don't ever throw a kick. He never needs to throw a kick again. I never want to see another Jake Shields kick because it's sad. It's sad from coming from an MMA fighter to see how poor his striking is. And Hector, he doesn't suck striking. I mean, his striking's pretty damn good, and his advantage on the feet is going to be so huge. I mean, a level of 10 versus a level of 1. And then you have the ground or stand-up grappling aspect of it. And Shields is at 9-10 level, but Hector's not a bum. I mean, he's got that judo background. He's 5 to 8, somewhere in that level, so he can counter a lot of it. I like the fight as much as I'm going to like any Jake Shields. I like it a lot more than most fights, but having Jake Shields in the title, I can almost say I like the fight.
Does it surprise you just how poor Jake Shields' striking is there, Brian? You know, because he's so good at the wrestling, and he's been at such a high level of MMA, you know, Elite XC, Strike Force. You know, does it really surprise you how he's got by with just his wrestling, considering how poor his striking is? You know, you wouldn't expect that from a top 10 guy anyway.
Does it surprise me? Yes, in this day and age of MMA, yeah, he can go win any tournament or any belt outside the UFC being a one-dimensional fighter that way, because his one dimension's that damn good. I think he's going to be exposed pretty badly in this fight, and we won't be talking about him. So it won't. I will be less surprised after this fight because it won't be a discussion anymore. He'll drop out of the top 10.
Do you think this is a bad style matchup here, Brian, for Jake Shields?
Yeah, I think in every aspect it's bad. I don't see him getting the takedown, and yeah, it is. I mean, props to Shields for taking the fight. This is a win that he needs to get that title shot again. I mean, fuck, if Shields knocks out Hector, oh my God, well, fucking, I'd have a heart attack. So the potential of an amazing win's there, but it is a bad thing. And I think mainly the main reason Hector is out of the top 10 is just because what has he had? One fight in this weight class, so he's just an unknown in this division right now. And I think after this, he's going to be a top 3 to 5 guy after he beats Shields.
Greg, what's your thoughts on Shields versus Lombard?
I think Shield, as a former middleweight, he's looking at this fight thinking, okay, I could do what Okami did, you know. I think he could out-grapple him, you know, and I personally don't sleep on Shields here. Okami got him down. Shields is a former middleweight. He's probably going to be able to get him down rounds 2 and 3, don't you guys think?
No.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting, you know. I always believe judo can counter wrestling. I believe you build up the strength, you know, the grappling knowledge, where to place yourself on the wrestling in judo. Can Shields deal with the judo is what I'm expecting. I don't know if the size will come into play. I think Hector's so strong that just the physical frame of Shields being taller and heavier, I don't think that'll even come into play, to be honest with you.
I'll give you that, because I don't think there's any way Okami could cut to welterweight.
That's my next question for you as well, as I mentioned with Brian. Do you think this is a bad style matchup for Shields potentially? You know, with the judo and the strength of Hector Lombard.
Given that Shields has been knocked out by Ellenberger, I certainly think Lombard could do it. You know what I mean? But it'll be interesting. It's one of those grappler, like you said, grappler versus striker. I'm interested in seeing it.
Okay, guys, that's a wrap for today's show. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out MMAcrypt.com.